Greetings, everyone, on the SciFiction awesomeness. We have an amazing guest here on the back in the Quantum Leap Accelerator waiting room, getting ready to join us on this awesome super broadcast. My name is Owen Cotter. You're watching SciFiction on SciFiction Radio. If you're listening to this on SciFiction Radio, it's episode 72. We're going to bring on Jim Bowers. He runs capedwonder.com. Let's bring him on here. Jim, can you hear me?
Hello, Owen. I can hear you.
How's it going there, sir? How's your day going?
We are great out here in Las Vegas. How about you?
Doing good. I love your backdrop, man. That's awesome.
Oh, I do too. There he is.
There he is, Superman goodness. So, like you've been doing, I watched that. We're on your IMDb, and you have a new book out you contributed to as well, I believe.
Well, yes. There is a book coming out from DK Books out of the UK that's going to cover the whole DC movie universe. I think they've done some similar books for Marvel.
Yes.
And which I've not read, but I like DC or DK Books a lot.
Yeah.
They're very nice people to deal with also. So yes, they reached out to me a few months ago, and we've got some content going in that book, which I think is coming out September 3rd this
Very
year.
cool. Very cool.
And you can already pre-order it on Amazon. So that's really exciting. I always get excited when these companies want to include Reeve material, legacy material. So yeah, that's wonderful. We've got great things always going on, always new things to look forward to. So Owen, I love your website.
Oh, I appreciate you, man. We've been working hard. We're trying to do some upgrades, and we're adding a anime section for fans watching and listening. And we're going to be putting in some new bells and whistles on here soon.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My kids are both into anime. They do conventions, and they're always talking about it. And they've gotten my wife and I to the theater to see different anime movies.
Very cool.
And so not knowing anything about it until about 3 years ago, it's a great new world to get into. And I have to tell you, I've never met such an enthusiastic bunch as I have at a movie theater with anime fans.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're actually going to be coming your way in Las Vegas the end of April. There's a massive anime, pop culture, and video game event called Level Up, LVLUP Up.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. That's because, again, my kids told me all about it. In fact, I think they're going to go. They're in their 20s and 30s and very passionate about it. So we all love pop culture in this family.
Yes, indeed. Awesomeness. Well, I got to talk to you. You got Christopher Reeves. We've had some anniversaries of the films over the last few years. You know, they've done a lot. I think there's a new Blu-ray set that just came out. Have you seen the Blu-ray set?
Well, the Blu-ray set, there was a big Blu-ray box set, which I happen to have here, which was the 2012 release.
Yeah.
And this had all of the films in it, plus Superman Returns.
Right. With what's his name?
Brandon Routh.
Brandon Routh, yeah.
Who, by the way, is a really, really nice guy. If you ever get to meet him at cons, you should definitely make an effort to do that. Very humble, very nice guy, very grateful for that opportunity that he had to play the Man of Steel. The 4K box set came out last year.
That's right, yeah.
And it does not include Superman Returns. They decided to focus on the theatrical cuts of the Christopher Reeve films, including, of course, the Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, which is, as we know, came out in November 2006.
Right.
And that, of course, has always created lots of conversation amongst the fans, which version they like better of Superman 2. Right. But the 4K is very nice. You can buy the individual releases. There's two versions of the box set. One's got a nice metal case. The other's just a standard slip case. And so those are awesome. They did a nice job overall. I think really the films that benefited the most from this 4K were actually Superman 3 and 4.
Oh, wow.
Although all of them have benefited. And Superman 2, of course, looks great. Clarity is good. I think the costume colors and color balance overall are greatly improved.
Very good.
So if you don't have a 4K player, I always recommend it. I'm a big supporter of physical media.
Me too.
We all love streaming because of the convenience. But really, you can't judge all the work that these studios do for these movies unless you look at the physical media, which is the best quality.
Mm.
I can't deny that sometimes I sit down and just open up Prime Video or Vudu or whatever
Right.
streaming service is in front of me, and sometimes I'll just watch them just because it's in front of me. But I hope physical media will continue to live down the road because, as you are well aware,
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges regarding that and what the studios are going to do for physical media future. So I'm hopeful that Warner will continue to put out some great product. Of course, last year they were celebrating the 100th anniversary of
Hmm.
Warner Brothers,
Yep.
and I think that's why they decided to focus on the theatrical cuts of Superman.
That makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, we know that there are extended cuts of these movies. They've all been revealed to the world, if you will, except for Superman 4. We've only seen snippets
Right.
and low resolution clips from the cut scenes, but we've not seen a full edit yet.
Right. They're very low resolution, not full 4K for you by any means, right?
Oh no, no. I mean, they're really interesting to watch,
Hmm.
and that movie, despite its financial challenges, has really grown in popularity over the years. You
For
could
sure.
call it a cult classic. I don't really call it that, but it is the last time we see Christopher Reeve in costume, and for me and for many others, it's that's the reason
For sure.
will continue to embrace the film because of that. The last time he appears so wonderfully as Clark and Superman.
I like
So,
that United Nations speech was pretty cool. He gave me that too. So.
well, it is, and there's a lot to love about the film, and the performances and chemistry of Margot Kidder and Chris are still very strong
Mhm.
in that film, like we saw in the first movie, which
You
is
got
why.
Lex Luthor back too, as well
Mhm.
on that. So.
Yeah, we got Gene back. Gene's a great guy. He's 93 years old now.
Wow.
And there was a recent autograph opportunity for you to mail in items for him to sign. He lives in New
Oh,
Mexico. He's retired from acting a long time ago.
right.
I think his decision to retire was based on the fact that he didn't want to play a bunch of old guys in movies. So he felt he'd done everything he could do, and he's an author now, living a good life.
Mhm.
And he's probably our oldest legacy actor
Right.
still around.
Have you met him? Have you ever got the Brian McClure? I think he's still alive too, right? Or Mark McClure?
Mark McClure?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I just saw Mark last week
Cool.
at the Superman in concert at the Walt Disney Concert Hall
Oh
in
wow.
Los Angeles.
How
So
was that? How was that?
fantastic,
I bet.
fantastic. I got a bunch of the stars there. We had Sarah Douglas, Aaron
Mhm.
Smolenski, little baby Clark Kent who picks the
Right.
truck up, who's also in Superman 3. Some people may not realize that he has a cameo in that film as the 8-year-old boy who puts money in the photo booth
Oh yeah, when the
and
little photos print out.
there you go, and catches, Clark changing
Right.
into Superman. So that's Aaron. He was a local boy who had never
Mhm.
acted before, local up in the Alberta, Calgary, Canada area. And so, anyway, his, mom answered a casting call, and the rest is history. So he's very engaged with the fan base and
That's
a
cool.
wonderful guy. Mark McClure was at the concert. We had David Michael Petru. That
Mhm.
name may be familiar to many of you. He's the author of the fantastic book called The Making of Superman the
Making of
Movie.
Superman. Yeah.
I hear birds in the background. I love it. Do you have, your window open?
Yeah, we've got a door here. There's all kind of. We're near Mexico, so there's a lot of tropical birds. We're in down in the border town in Laredo, near Texas. So.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I try to open my windows here whenever I can. We have lots of hummingbirds. We have road runners, just
Oh,
like you see in Looney Tunes, running
right.
across the road, and they taunt my cat when I take my cat for a walk.
That's awesome.
I think they want him to chase them. So, yeah, and of course, we got lots of coyotes walking through the
Mhm.
neighborhood. So every time I see that, I'm thinking Looney Tunes. But
Right.
anyway, let's see. Who else did we have at the concert? We also had Peter McDonald.
That name sounds familiar. Who was
Well,
that?
it should be. Peter was um, the primary camera operator on Superman the movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Jeffrey Unsworth, of course, was the cinematographer. And Jeffrey and Peter worked together on many films, including Zardoz.
Oh,
Did you
that's
ever
the one with
see that
Sean
film?
Connery. Yeah, sci-fi film. Yeah.
Yes. I think that was my favorite Sean Connery outfit of his entire
It's a
career.
wild outfit for sure.
Zardoz, the
It's
big head
the
floating
big
around.
floating around in there.
There you go. And Peter McDonald also was a second unit director of the Hoth Planet scenes for The
Oh
Empire
wow,
Strikes Back.
that was a great
His
movie. Irvin Kershner worked on that one, I believe, right?
Irvin Kershner,
Yeah,
right. So Peter had to endure all of the freezing weather and frostbite
right.
up in Norway for that.
It's the
And
coldest winter they had at the time, I
oh,
believe.
oh, yeah, and my understanding is James Gunn has gone back up in that
Mhm.
general area, I think,
Yeah.
filming Fortress of
Actually, just
Solitude
just
scenes.
moderated his brother's panel at Fan Expo New Orleans back in January. Super nice guy. His brother
Very
Sean.
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So I know he's immersed
Mhm.
in that film for a while, just like Richard Donner was.
Yep.
Almost 40, let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 47 years ago on Thursday,
Oh wow.
Richard Donner started filming Superman.
Hmm.
March 28th, 1977. And do you know the first scenes filmed?
The fortress scenes, or which one? I believe that.
Close, close.
Uh,
The very first thing he filmed,
Krypton scenes.
Marlon Brando draped in black velvet to film his monologue to Clark Kent, his
You had to get
floating
no
head.
dust. Yeah, I remember he was on the thing. No dust could be on. It had to be clean.
Had to be clean and black. So that
Right.
was the first day,
Right.
and they went from there. But it went on until almost the end of 1978. Just and as you know, as many fans know, he was filming 2 movies at the same time.
Or the other, was it Godfather, or was it which one was that one?
Well, Richard Donner was filming 2 Superman
Oh,
movies
him.
at the
Yeah,
same
got
time.
you.
Right,
Got
right. So, at some point, they decided, well, we have to stop filming scenes for 2 because we
you.
need to get 1 done. Superman, the movie, was supposed to be a June '78 summer movie,
Right. Hmm.
and because they got so far behind, the production, they decided to delay it to Christmas. So now I always consider it a Christmas movie.
Nothing wrong with that. It's
Oh,
Christmas.
yeah.
And then I love the slogan of that film, like "You will believe a man can fly." That's so
That's
cool.
right. That's right, and that's one of a few.
Hmm. Hmm.
But this one ultimately won out. But if you listen to some of the trailers or TV spots,
Hmm.
you'll also hear this Christmas Superman brings you the gift of flight,
Oh, I have
and
seen
then
that one.
other
Yeah.
right, and then other prototype ads also featured the Man of Steel is real,
Cool.
and then another was someone to believe in.
Hmm.
So ultimately, you'll believe a man can fly one over, which is great. And that was the number one challenge they had, of course, was to make Superman fly convincingly.
Right.
And so once they had, determined that it was really coming along well, and
Hmm.
Richard Donner really encouraged and, pushed his British team to, go above and beyond anything they'd ever done before in their career, and many of them were very seasoned people in the industry, and some
Oh
of them
yeah.
were not young people. They already worked on a lot of movies, but, that was his biggest concern, and when he arrived on the set, any of the, all of the test footage they had shown him, none of it worked.
Hmm.
So imagine, getting hired to film a movie about probably the most famous character that flies, and none of the footage is convincing.
Wow. So what
Imagine
did
that.
they had to go back and reshoot that, or what was the reason the footage
Well,
wasn't used?
a lot of it was test footage.
Okay.
None of it was, final.
Hmm.
He was not the first director, he was the second, Guy
Right.
Hamilton of
Right.
James Bond,
Oh,
films, and
Was they filmed some? Did they film some of it on Pinewood Studios, or was that at
they filmed at Shepperton
Yeah.
Studios in England and then down the road at Pinewood.
Yeah,
And
correct.
basically, they took over the whole studio. They had
Like that
every stage
Fortress sound
occupied.
set was massive. They had to build all that like inside of a massive theater or whatever. Yeah,
Right, that's
sound stage.
yep, there were 2 locations where the fortress was done. The interior of the fortress was done at Shepperton,
Okay.
and that was some of the first footage they shot for the movie was Jeff East as young Clark,
Right.
um,
I had a
talking.
question about Jeff East. Did they use? I noticed like I was watching the streaming version recently on Amazon or somewhere. Did they dub Christopher Reeve's voice over his as young Clark? Am I correct on that?
They did,
Okay.
except for scenes that are in the extended cut.
Okay.
that we first saw on ABC television in February of 1982. If you
Mm.
watch that, or you watch the Blu-ray that Warner Archive released in 2017 of the
Yeah, I've seen
extended cut,
that.
you'll hear some of Jeff's own voice.
Cool.
Been a lot of discussion about why that was done. Basically, they wanted to make it seem more like he was the same person
Ah,
as
okay.
opposed to two different actors. In fact, they didn't even promote Jeff very much because they didn't want to call attention to the fact that he was a different actor.
Okay.
So that was the reason. Not uncommon for people's voices to get dubbed in movies or for the
Right.
same actor to go back
Right.
into a studio and watch their scenes and re-record their dialogue.
I mean, ask James Earl Jones, right?
Well, that yeah, I asked David Prowse.
David Prowse. Yeah.
You know, we've heard and seen footage of him speaking through the Darth Vader mask,
Yes.
and he had a very deep British accent. I guess that's not what they were after.
Right.
And it didn't sound right speaking through the mask anyway. If they had still used his voice, he would have had to go in and re-record everything.
I
But
was reading. There's an article I read in a magazine. It was about action figures and collectibles. I think it's called Action Figure Digest. But they do excerpt interviews with certain actors. They had a great interview with David Prowse in that book.
oh, David's a great guy. I met him in '92,
Okay.
and many fans are aware that he was brought in to help Christopher Reeve train
Mm-hmm. He's
to,
a swordsman. Yeah.
to bulk
Well,
up
yeah.
for the role of Superman. Chris
Right.
was Chris was kind of lanky,
Mm.
very tall, and had a great frame to build upon, but he was lanky. So once he objected to the fake muscles they were considering, he said, "No, I want to work out." So,
Right.
but David told me that the news and magazines had somewhat exaggerated his level of involvement. He basically came in, showed Chris the basics, and he was gone.
Gotcha.
Chris, he said, really didn't need his help very much or very long. But David was a great guy, really, really nice, polite, friendly guy.
Mm.
And I always liked David. But um, yeah, it's too bad. So many people that we admire in these films and
Right.
television shows aren't with us anymore. And that's really the driving force behind why we do and what you do
Yeah.
is to keep their memory and their legacy, top of mind all the time.
Right.
I mean, that's what we grew up with. That's the nostalgic,
For sure.
aspect of it. And not only is it because of our memories as kids, but these films are just so iconic today. You sit
Absolutely.
anybody down in front of a TV set or a movie theater screen and show them these classic films.
For sure.
If they're really young or have never seen them or haven't seen them in a long time, I think many people are surprised just how great they hold up.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, the special effects, even to this day, are still solid. You got like I was watching Superman 4 a while back. Even those effects with like the radioactive, this guy with the sun when he like turns down after they put him in, and they power him back up, and it looks great.
Well, that's Mark Pillow, and what a great guy he is. We've had him at a couple of Caped Wonder reunions. You couldn't meet a nicer guy.
Cool.
He has great memories of filming with Chris, and thought Chris was just a really dynamic person. Chris Reeve directed most of the moon battle scenes,
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
and so he really enjoyed working with him in that capacity as well as actor and director. But of course, very physically demanding. Um, I enjoy those a lot, but I look at those costumes getting beat up on the set and thinking,
Right.
"Oh, look at those costumes. It wouldn't it be great to have one of those?"
They had
Well,
some that went to auction, didn't they? Recently or about?
well, I don't know about the ones that were torn up in the moon fight, but wouldn't it
Right.
be great to have one of those with rips in it and dirt on it? I wouldn't even wash it. I think
Right. It'd
I'd
be like
leave it just like
put
it
it in
was.
display cases, like so what do they call it, screen use props or something.
The battle used costume, right? It'd be the same as a Star Wars stormtrooper
Right.
costume or something similar to that, with all the scuff marks and imperfections that George made sure all of them
Yeah.
had to look more
It was like
realistic.
a used universe that Lucas had and all that.
Oh yeah, that's what I love about it. But there have been a number of Chris Reeve costumes. Some Mark Pillow Nuclear Man costumes have been
Hmm.
on the auction block. The interesting thing about these costumes is none of them were the same. In fact, in other words, from costume to costume, there are variations. So each one is slightly unique. The S shield on the chest is different on each costume. Nuclear Man had individually glued on or heat transferred on these individual dots that made up the sun on his chest, and those
Right.
dots, no two were alike. So that makes it fun to try to screen match these costumes.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
you can do that, then you've really got a prize. But it's interesting, these costumes and any of these props from the Christopher Reeve Superman films continue to go up in value. And
Mhm.
the demand seems to be very, very strong to this day, including autographed items,
Mhm.
crystals.
Oh yeah, the power like where's the crystals like the green one? Where there's other museums or
Well, they're still around, and you can see them on Prop Store of London has had
okay.
them on the auction block. Julian's Auctions, Heritage recently
Mhm.
had one in their auction a few days ago.
Okay.
And in fact, they also sold an original 3 foot tall starship
Oh
that was
wow,
used in Krypton scenes, as well as a miniature flying Superman.
that's super cool.
Now, one of the things that they used to do is have these small miniature Superman
Mhm.
figures that they would fly.
Like
There
maquette miniatures like that with a wires.
Right,
Yeah,
right. There has even been a little Lois Lane for some of the scenes where they're supposed to be very far away in the sky. They
I didn't know
sometimes
that.
used miniatures as opposed to the actors or stunt people.
Very
So
cool.
they were very innovative, and they even had capes that had little fluttering rods called a cape
Mm,
flapper to make the cape appear as though it's being blown by the wind.
nice.
And Chris even wore one on his back, and I have one.
Mm,
They attached the cape to it. It was radio controlled, and it would actually the little fingers or the rods would do this to make it
wow.
look like his cape was blowing.
So that's how they got that effect when it was like when he's flying and everything.
Right, because if you just use a wind machine or a fan, the cape tended to blow over his head
Right.
out of control, and he would have to flip it back over his head. So some of the early test footage, I'm sure the cape was driving Chris crazy because it was just fluttering everywhere.
Right.
And as many fans have talked about too, there were all kinds of different cape styles. There
Yeah.
was flying cape, standing cape, walking cape, a
A
shorter cape.
didn't they have a magnetic one or something?
Well, the capes would attach to his shoulders with these snaps,
Snaps. Yeah.
and then the straps would go under his armpits, and you would tie it off underneath the tunic in the back, and it would come up out of the.
Gotcha.
As you can see up here, it would come
Right.
out of the shoulders.
That's right.
But this was not an easy costume to put on. And when you had to take bathroom breaks, you had to get help being
Right.
undressed.
Right.
So it was, I've put one on. It's rather baggy on me because I'm only 5'9", 170 pounds, but Chris was a big guy. But
He was like 6'4" or something like that.
Chris was 6'4". He averaged about 205 to 215, 220 on
Mhm.
weight. It was not easy for Chris to keep his weight on between movies because he was kind of built more like a basketball player.
Right.
He had very broad shoulders and a great frame, great waist, but he'd have to bulk up between each film
Right.
and get the weight back on because one of the things that's interesting about these costumes is they're very slimming.
Mhm.
You can look big just standing there without a shirt on. You put one of the costumes on and it actually makes you look less bulky.
That's one of
So
the
you
things that the Star Trek: The Next Generation cast had said during season one. If you look at their season one uniforms,
Mhm.
they're like skin tight. Picard and all of those really thin. But they're also hard to get out of and stuff like that. So
Right.
they got into the second season or so. They got into the easier, more comfortable uniforms. I hear what you're saying on that.
Right. So Gerard Christopher, you may know that name. Played Superboy
Yep.
on TV. He was the second Superboy. That was also an Ilya Salkind production. And he and I have been friends a long time. And he also talked to me about that. He was already a fitness guy and already been lifting weights.
Mhm.
And he said, I actually had to bulk up bigger than I originally thought I would have to,
Right.
because once I put the costume on, I looked too slim.
Right.
So I admire these guys for their dedication to hitting the gym because that's definitely not something I like to do. And Chris
Yeah.
Reeve did not find weightlifting very pleasurable, but he was very committed to the part
Mm.
and he knew what was in people's minds as to what Superman should look like.
Right.
So that dedication and that discipline that he already brought into the roles definitely had a tremendous impact on um, the believability of his dual role. And speaking of that, just the other day we were talking about online and social media about the extraordinary transformation that Chris could make between Clark Kent and Superman just with his posture,
Yeah.
his speaking, his mannerisms, and I don't think any other actor has come close to what he
I haven't seen that.
accomplished.
Right.
Yeah, and I've always told people that I felt that he would probably be nominated for Best Actor if it were today because of
For sure.
what he was able to uh, portray to the fans. Of course, we know that scene where he really wants to tell really wants to tell Lois
Mhm.
in the first film who he really is. He
Right.
takes his
After he had
glasses
left, he
off.
comes back to the door, right?
Right, he takes
Right.
his glasses off, he stands up straight, and
Mhm.
his voice changes, and then he reverts back to Clark again.
Right.
And, for me, that's the Oscar-winning scene. I remember Roger Ebert, Siskel and Ebert back in the day,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
who we used to rely on for
Right.
movie reviews. He said that's the scene, that's the moment. And, I always admired Chris for um, that, and for the fact that he found Clark Kent more interesting and more challenging, to play because of his theater experience. You know, he was a stage actor,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
that was Chris's first love, not film. It was stage, and he was constantly in plays in between films. That's just where he started and his first love, because I think part of it was he just loved the interaction with the audience and the feedback he would get. And every night was a little bit different. You never knew what to anticipate on the stage. So that I think that was probably just a lot of fun for him, and he brought so much of that discipline and that style of acting into these films. While he was filming Superman, he pretty much stayed in character
True. Yeah.
in between takes, and that wasn't every actor's style on those films. So for him, that was a little challenging that the other actors didn't stay in character so much. So he had to. And look at that, my phone's ringing. I didn't mute my phone.
So good.
Shame on me.
I
But
wanted to ask you a question. So, did you ever get to meet him? By the way, first off, and Christopher Reeves.
I did.
Okay.
And one of the first things that he ever told me was
Hmm.
oftentimes people called him Reeves
Ah, yeah, because of
because
George
they
Reeves.
could
Right.
because of George. And
Right.
yeah, and he used to say, "Well, my last name's Reeve. I
Hmm.
left the S on my chest."
Nice.
That's how he used to address it, because I think, we know that Reeve is probably much less common than Reeves.
Right.
But over time, of course, people realized they weren't related, and they weren't,
Right.
uncle or father or anything like that. But it is interesting, the names were so similar. I met Chris when he was still able-bodied
Okay.
at a convention, the only U.S. convention he ever did.
Hmm. What year
Uh,
was that?
that was May 14th, 1994. So we're
Okay.
coming up on the 30th anniversary. Um, Back in the 90s and the 80s, I don't think that most actors were charging for autographs in those days at
No.
cons.
It
I
was,
didn't
yeah.
start.
Adam West and Burt Ward would dress in costume and sign for free. A lot of those.
Right, right. So I started going to cons in Atlanta, to the Atlanta Fantasy Fair.
Okay.
And that was in the 80s. And I think Sarah Douglas, who played Ursa, was
Hmm.
probably the first Superman actress or actor to be at cons from the
Wow.
Christopher Reeve films. So I was living in Atlanta in 94, and I was working in the photography industry,
Okay.
and saw in a paper that Chris Reeve was going to be at a con. And I was in total disbelief. I thought, oh, there's no way. The Dixie Trek Convention is what it was called. I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's now called Dragon Con.
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah.
Right. But at the time, it was Dixie Trek. I do believe that's what it morphed into, if I'm not mistaken.
Gotcha.
Um, I contacted the organizer, Ron Nastrom, and said, "Hey, is he really coming?" He goes, "Absolutely. I've talked to him on the phone. He's going to be here." And I couldn't believe it. He also invited Noelle Neal, who I'd already known.
Hmm.
Of course, she was the original live action Lois Lane.
Yeah. From back
She
in the,
was
with the George Reeves area. Yeah.
right. The second season onward, she was Lois, and of course, she was with Kirk Allen in the two movie serials
Mm.
prior to that.
Right.
So she was also going to be a guest. And so, needless to say, I was extremely excited. And I said to the organizer, let me help. I'll be happy to help you however I can. Well, one thing led to another. Chris walks in the door, and I'm the guy to greet him.
Oh wow.
And you can read about it on the Cape Wonder website, but it was an amazing day.
Mm.
And one of the things that impressed me so much about Chris was that originally the autograph session, of course, no charge for autographs,
Mm.
but they were limited to two
Hmm. You too
because
for free. Oh wow.
because of the number of people there.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
And it was a small con in a an older hotel, very quaint compared to cons today.
Right. I think Dragon Con
And
takes like 6 hotels now with the
oh my
whole.
God, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But this was a small con, very nicely done. And he said, "Where am I going to be signing autographs?"
Mm.
And I think this is how the story went. They said, "Well, we've put the table up on the stage where you'll be speaking later." And later on, he did a 90-minute
Oh wow.
self-hosted Q&A panel, which was fantastic. And I filmed the whole thing.
But where is that on the site on Cape Wonder?
Yes, it's on the website.
Cool.
So he said, "Where's the table going to be?" They said, "Well, we thought we'd put it up on stage. People would wait in line at the bottom of the stairs, walk up the stairs, come up to you,
Mm.
get autograph signed, and then walk off the stage on the other side, down the stairs." He said, "Well, I would prefer that them not have to walk up on the stairs because they might trip and hurt themselves."
Right.
So he said, "Why don't you move the table down to the floor, but turn it sideways so there's not a barrier between the fan and me.
Hmm.
I want the fan to be able to walk right up to me.
I like that.
We talk, sign autographs, and then I can immediately stand and take pictures. There's no table.
It's
Now,
pretty
there
cool.
was the table, but it was sideways.
Right. Right.
So that impressed the heck out of me, and I've never seen a star do that since. Of course, every con we go to now,
Never
there's
seen
a
that ever.
table. And many of the celebrities don't come around the table. You have to lean in and take a picture with them, right?
Right.
And I think that's probably the most common thing you see because later on you can go do the photo ops.
Right.
All the cons have turned into this separate photo ops
Right.
section. So that impressed me a lot, and I sat with him for most of the autograph session while he talked to people. He was very engaged with everybody, and I remember him looking up at the line, which was going out the door, and he said, "Are all those people waiting for me?" I said, "They sure are." He said, "Well, I'm not leaving until I've spoken with everybody."
That's a
And the
gentleman.
minute the last person was in the line and spoke with him, he had to leave because he was going to film a movie with Michael Keaton called
Hmm.
Speechless.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, on the set, what do you think they were doing the whole time? Yes, they were joking that Batman and Superman were doing a
Right.
movie together. So Dixie Trek was fantastic. We did some I did a photo session with the two of them. Here it
Oh
is.
wow.
That's one of many photos I shot of them together, and then I sent the photo to both of them and they signed it. So
That's awesome.
I've been a photographer for 40 years, so for me, this is extra special because they autographed one of my photos.
Hmm.
And they were so gracious. And of course, Noelle is always a crowd pleaser. I knew her for almost 30 years, and she loved Chris. She loved George. She said they were both very much gentlemen,
Hmm.
and their interest was honing the craft of acting, not
Hmm.
so much being movie stars.
Right.
And it just so happened that Chris came along at a great time in our history when I think the world really needed a great positive Superman movie.
For
And that's
sure.
what we got in 1978.
For sure.
So I think that's why that movie and all of its sequels are just still so popular today. And what I really love today is now we have parents and grandparents introducing these movies to their kids and grandkids.
Yeah.
So it's always a delight to go to a movie theater and see that they've brought the young ones
Hmm.
to experience these movies.
Yeah.
So that makes you feel great that these are going to live on. So here we are at 45 years
Mm-hmm.
last Christmas for Superman the movie.
Yep.
And of course, the movie was continuing to play in the theater well into 1979.
Yep.
So, like Star Wars, it ran in
Mm-hmm.
the theater a long time. And
and replayed too.
I don't know what year you were born, but when I was 17 when the first Superman movie hit the screen,
Yeah,
and movies stayed in the theater a long time,
I was born in
especially the pop.
84.
You were born in 84.
Yeah, May of 84. Yeah.
May of 84, I was an officer in the Army when you were
Oh
born.
wow. My grandfather
So
was
I
in the army as well. He was
y
he got up to the rank of colonel. All the Apollo astronauts like Virgil Grissom and those guys would hang out at his house with their Corvettes. He worked at Redstone Arsenal. He was like, when I was a kid, he had his own like private parking space at Redstone. We go up there, and they're like salute him like king of the universe, and
There you
park and
go.
go to the commissary and stuff.
Well, I grew up with an Army colonel and an Army general, my
Very cool.
grandfather and my dad. So I grew up an Army brat, and then I was in the Army. And so, needless to say, when you're an Army kid, you are taught all about morals and values, and yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and
Right.
being polite, holding the door for ladies,
Mm-hmm.
and etiquette at the table, and dressing up nicely and treating your neighbors well. So, of course, that's one of many reasons why Superman always appealed to me. Now, I was not a comic book reader,
Mm-hmm.
never read a comic book my whole childhood just because I didn't have access to them.
Right.
So it was George Reeves that introduced me to Superman.
Hmm.
And I'd watch him on a little 13-inch black and white TV before I'd go to school. And then when Superman the movie came out, that just everything just took off, literally and figuratively. It just really, really took off for me. And Cape Wonder, our mission has been, your mission is a brighter future, right? A
Envisioning a
positive
positive future.
future.
Yeah.
I love that. Love that. So
Thank you.
we're all about celebrating the legacy of Christopher Reeve,
Sure.
and it's just continued to grow and grow. We're at year 22 this
Mhm.
coming
For
Thursday.
CW. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it started off as a very humble little website,
Mhm.
and I decided to share a bunch of pictures that I had gotten from Pinewood Studios that had
Mhm.
never been released. The very first picture I ever showed on the website was this one.
Oh wow.
Do you have this box set?
Which one is that one?
That is the Christopher Reeve Superman Collection DVD from 2006.
I
It's all the
think I do
movies.
have that one with the kind of like the clear, kind of reflective front. Yeah, I do have that
Yep.
one.
Well, that photo Warner Brothers licensed from me.
Hmm.
And anyway, and then they colorized it
Hmm.
and put it on the box. So that's the
That's
very
super.
first picture I ever released on the website, and it was never used in publicity
That's super
uh,
cool.
by Warner. I don't know why, because it's such an iconic picture. But that's how we started on the website, and I started hearing from lots of fans all over the world back in the early internet days. Really exciting when you get your first email or message from someone in Europe,
We
right?
just got our first message the other day. This lovely, lovely multi-paragraph letter from a gentleman named Aiden. It was just, no, his name Aiden Sterling. If you're listening to the broadcast, thank you so much for the letter. He was very complimentary of the site, and he said that he makes it his go-to resource for sci-fi news and all that stuff.
Well,
So,
that's awesome.
yeah.
That's really awesome. It makes you feel great that you're
Mhm.
on the right path, and what you're doing and all the time and effort you put into this is worthwhile.
Right.
And that's what I'm loving about social media
Mhm.
is we're connecting with new people all the time from all over the world that have great stories, and that's the most gratifying part of all this is the connections, the networking
Mhm.
with fans
For
of
sure.
all ages. We're trying to get more ladies to chime in because we're about
Sure.
90% guys, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
But I love hearing stories about other people who have met Chris or other
Mhm.
actors in the movies, or maybe their relatives worked on the movies. So we've
Mhm.
gotten great stories from them. And back in 2015, we did the largest Christopher Reeves Superman reunion,
Mm.
and it was at WonderCon in Anaheim,
That's
California.
the sister to San Diego, right?
I guess you would consider it that, yeah. But that was our biggest reunion.
Mhm.
And my friend Jay Towers, who's a radio personality and newscaster for Fox out of Detroit,
Mhm.
gave me a call and he said, "Hey, I see you're doing a WonderCon reunion. I want to help."
Very cool.
And I'd never spoken with Jay before, but I knew he was around and was a big fan.
Right.
And it just exploded at that point because he provided so much great coverage He's a great radio guy. And we had 1,200 people at our panel.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I walked in this empty panel room and I couldn't believe WonderCon had given me a room so big.
That's like quarter as big as the biggest panel at Comic Con now. I think
I know it.
the
I was just flabbergasted that they decided to give me such a big room, and I had no idea who was going to show up.
right.
And we walk out because Jay co-hosted the panel with me, and there's 1,200 people sitting there, and my mind was absolutely blown. I was shaking with excitement.
Hmm.
Jay, of course, super comfortable in front of people.
Right.
He's in front of people all the time doing charity work and all that. I'm that way generally, but it's the anticipation of getting up there and talking
Right.
that's,
No, I know.
that can be a little nerve wracking. And then you get into it and you're like,
You just like nail it and it's
you
done.
nail it. Yeah. Because you're so passionate about it. You can talk about it all day. It's
Right.
just so familiar and the stars are so supportive. That's the thing about this group of actors and crew. It is that they were very much family
Mhm.
on the sets, and that continues.
Right.
And they're so grateful for the opportunities they had to play these characters, whether it was
Mhm.
Jimmy Olsen
Mark
or
McClure, yeah.
Art McClure. It was Lenny, Lex Luthor's nephew in
Nephew.
Superman 4. It didn't matter which movie or which part. They all had they all have great stories, and the stories are what really drive all of this. Is what are the stories? What are your memories? So Jay, a few years later in 2018, said, "Hey, I'm on iHeartRadio."
Hmm.
I said, "You are?" He goes, "Yes, my radio show's on iHeartRadio. Of course, it's also on other podcasts
Right.
platforms, but being on iHeartRadio is a big deal."
Yeah.
He said, "Would you consider doing a podcast for Caped Wonder?" And
Hmm.
I'm like, "Wow, never done anything like that before. If you know how to do it, I'm all in." So we're at over 50 episodes now. We don't do them on a regular basis. We do them occasionally throughout the year as we find really compelling, interesting guests. We're after the people that the fans don't necessarily know or have ever heard of that worked on these movies. Uncredited heroes, I call them.
Oh, that's cool. I like the title of that.
Like young people who were apprentices. We
Mhm.
recently spoke with a guy who was an apprentice. He was about 19 and he helped make the crystals for the fortress.
Nice.
He was new to the business. He did whatever they asked him to do, and he jumped right in there and had this amazing opportunity.
Mhm.
And great stories have come out of it. And that's who we're always looking for.
Right.
Um, uh, not, or in addition to the actors and crew that people know so well.
For sure.
So we try to mix it up. But it's really fun to try to dig around and see who we can find or who might come forward. And we have people fairly regularly tell us about someone, hey, you may want to talk to this guy. He
Hmm.
worked under this person for Star Wars, Superman, etc. And it is amazing, as you can well imagine, Owen, the overlap of Star Wars and
Hmm.
Superman crew.
Yeah, I bet.
So many of the same people,
Yeah.
or in the same area.
The
Uh,
visual effects and the
oh
filming and
yeah,
all
and
this.
model making. James Bond, of course, Derek
Mhm.
Meddings did so many miniatures. He did all the great miniature work, or most of it, in the Superman 1 and 2. Spio Loved Me, his great tanker, that swallows up the submarines. They filmed that at 007 Soundstage,
It's a
just like
great
they
film.
filmed
Yeah.
the Arctic for the Fortress.
Mm.
So they had to build the interior of the Fortress at Shepperton, film all
Right.
of that, and then later go to Pinewood and build the exterior of the Fortress and film all that.
When he throws the crystal and it
When he
builds it.
throws the crystal.
Right.
That's the 007 soundstage that they flooded
Mm.
and brought in all this styrofoam
It's
and
like
had to
dry
cut.
ice or something like that
Right, and they
too.
had to cut the styrofoam and dry ice
Right.
and pretend that they were very cold when actually it was really, really hot on those sound stages.
Right.
And Chris was just melting in that costume. So they were always having to change his tunics because his armpits would start sweating and they'd say, "Oh, cut, let's put another tunic on you."
Right.
So I think of all the parts of his costume, the tunic was what he probably changed out the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, so many great things. But if you have never been on Cape Wonder,
Mm.
I had a really golden opportunity back in the 90s. Pinewood Studios was starting to clean house.
Mm,
And they had in one of their storage units a whole lot of content from Superman that the
mm,
story goes they were going to throw away
mm,
or get rid of it or give it away or something. Well, through a wonderful contact here in the US, I connected with a guy in England and got most of it. And that's where we finally got to see what Richard Donner really shot for Superman 2
mm.
and so many other photographs behind the scenes that really give us a beautiful idea of what the photographic journey was. And when I got all this content, I thought, I've got to share this. How am I going to do that? And this is the 90s now. Internet's just getting started.
Very beginnings of the internet stuff. Yeah.
Right. So I was in the advertising and marketing at the time. And my graphic designer said, "Why don't you start a website?" I said, "I don't know anything about that." He says, "I can get you going."
Mm,
So there you go. We started Cape to Wonder, and the name, of course, Cape came out of the newspaper that we see in the first movie. And I know you know the newspaper,
oh yeah.
Cape to Wonder,
There,
Sun
there,
City,
yep.
right? So
Yep.
that paper was on my wall because I got that paper from Pinewood.
Mm,
And I literally looked up one day and saw it framed in front of me, and I said, "There's my domain name.
that's awesome.
It's perfect," because it automatically connects it to the Chris Reeve films.
Right.
I've never heard of Superman being called Cape Wonder
Right.
until the first Superman film. Don't think it
Well,
was ever in the comic books, and
I
I'm
don't think
not
it's ever in the comic books. I
no,
know.
and I've
Right.
never heard it used since.
Mm,
And I really don't know who came up with the name. That's one of the great Superman movie mysteries is who came up with it. Regardless, that's a name I thought would be perfect, and the rest is history.
well, when we did a redesign of our logo on our site of this last year, so we actually the original logo was kind of flat and plain and blue, and I wanted it something to be how like the title effects in the first Superman they come on,
Oh,
come back.
yeah.
So we wanted to have kind of a 3D effect with some blue, and he kind of pans, he flies over the horizon of the sun at
There
the end
you
of the
go.
movie. Put the eclipse of that, and they had the comet kind of going up, so it's going to the stars, so it's kind of
Right.
forward, moving forward, positive into the future.
There
So it's
you
kind of
go.
a whole motif of the new logo.
Hey, I love that, and I love that positive is a key word in what you do
Yeah.
because that's been something I've always focused on, when, I'm doing anything related to
Mhm.
Superman.
I appreciate that.
Whether I'm having conversation with people online or just the way we, communicate with people through imagery, through
Mhm.
articles, through our videos, through our podcast. I focus on the positive elements, why we love this character so much, that he's all about being positive and hopeful
He's a
and
friend.
encouraging, and that was really important to Chris, that he be portrayed as a friend, someone that you're not afraid of, someone that you welcome, that you can inspire others,
Yeah,
from the gifts you've been given, and that was something that he, was adamant about communicating. So that to me, when she says, "Who are you?" is a really important scene that, sets the tone really for the entire series.
for sure.
You don't
Well,
hear him say that anymore except in the
no,
first film.
it's the first film. Well, I
Right.
wanted to thank you, Jim, for joining us here on this broadcast. We got about 30 seconds or so before we wrap up the time slot. I wanted to very much thank you for joining in. On your website's capedwonder.com. Everybody check it out if you're in Superman, DC, and want to find all kind of good news. Jim, thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Owen, I appreciate it, and I wish you great success, and I love that you had Jeffrey Morris on
Yep, he's
your page.
awesome.
I just met him at Superman in concert. What a great guy.
Jeffrey's awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Jim. May the force be with you always. So say we all. Superman goodness, and I'll live long and prosper.
Stay super, okay?
Thank you, sir. You as well. Likewise.
Have a great day.